We're going to go through this graph, and it's entitled Insulin Resistance Leads to Diabetes. And at the end of this movie, you're going to be able to describe this in one sentence. So let's take care of a couple of things here. On this side of the graph, the y-axis, this is the amount. And over here on the x-axis, this is time. And this time can be anywhere from years to 15 plus years. So we're going to start here with normal and go through some definitions first. So insulin resistance is just the inability to use insulin well or effectively in your body. So the inability for your body to use insulin well. Insulin production, that's the insulin produced in your pancreas, so how much you produce. And this fasting plasma glucose, fasting is when you don't eat, and usually this is considered from midnight until the morning when you have your blood sugar taken. And glucose is the simplest form of sugar, and plasma is the stuff in between your blood cells. And so what they're doing is they're actually seeing what your blood sugar count is in the plasma. And so I'm going to just call this blood sugar for simplicity. So on the normal stage, now we're ready to look at what's going on. The insulin resistance, you can see, is fairly level, and you can see that the insulin production is also level. And when these two are level, you can see that the fasting plasma glucose, or the blood sugar, it's also level, or it's normal, so you're within normal blood sugar range. Later, in the impaired fasting glucose stage, what happens is you can see that the insulin resistance starts to go up, and this is important because this is the first thing that happens. And the response to your resistance going up is that your pancreas produces more insulin to try to keep things in check. And it does a pretty good job because you can see that your blood sugar stays fairly constant or fairly level, which is where you want it. And then we're going to go into what's the turning point that gets you into a type 2 diabetes. And that turning point is, what you can do is you can see that insulin resistance increases a little still right here. But the turning point happens right here. And that's when this insulin production starts to decrease. So as soon as the insulin production decreases, you can no longer keep your blood sugar level, and so it automatically starts to just spike, or it goes up. So that's all there is to it, and you can actually do this in one sentence now. So it goes like this. So if insulin resistance, if that increases, then what you can see is that your body is going to this is your insulin production. Your insulin production goes down. That's that churning point. And then the result, or the effect, is that the blood sugar goes up. So it's at this point right here that you're considered a type 2 diabetic. So there's both good news and bad news on all this. So let me give you the bad news. So the bad news is that since this happens over time, if you have your blood sugars that are high, anytime they're high, there's minor damage happening inside your body. And some of these things can be just like capillaries, blood vessels that are damaged, and that can result in things like blindness. It's called retinopathy, and those blood vessels in your retina actually bust, and then they make scar tissue. And if you get enough of that, you actually can get you can become blind. Another one is you can have blood vessels that aren't working in your kidneys, and then that's called nephropathy, and that's when you go onto a dialysis machine. Another one is you can have blood vessels that start to close down or don't work in your hands or your feet. That's called peripheral vascular disease, but the point is that if you don't have blood supply, for example, to your toes, that's when toes turn black and they're amputated or feet. And then there's a nerve pain, so your nerves can get damaged to the point where it's so severe. I've heard people say they'd rather have their feet or their lower legs amputated because the pain was so bad. And then with all that also is heart disease, which is actually the leading killer of diabetics. So that's kind of all the bad news. But here is the good news. The good news is that 90% of type 2 diabetes is preventable. 90% is preventable. So that's the good news, and that's where we're going to go from here. So have a good day, and now you know in one sentence what happens to people that become type 2 diabetic. The insulin resistance, it does what? It increases the insulin production, it decreases, and the result is that the blood sugar increases.